Barrera, Voice of Strength, here with episode number 38 of our series. We are amplifying the voices of the families of those who have been killed by police in the USA. Today we are covering the killing of Mely Corado, killed by LAPD. Mely's brother Albert Corado is joining us and will be sharing his sister's story and the details of what goes down when your loved one is killed by police. Albert, thank you so much for joining. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself and share a little bit about your sister as well?
Yeah, hi, my name is Albert Corado. I'm a community organizer here in Los Angeles. Was born and raised here, was born in Koreatown, or Westwood, lived in Koreatown until I was about 6. Then moved to the Valley. And I've moved away a few times. But LA is my home. I love it here. And involved in a bunch of activism and organizing in town here. My sister was named Mely Corado. She was shot and killed on July 21st, 2018 at the Silver Lake Trader Joe's. The LAPD was in pursuit of a suspect who ran inside the store, and they fired 8 shots into the store. One of them hit my sister, killing her within, I'd say, half an hour. Mely was, people always talk to me about Mely and who she was and what I remember. And I think if you had asked me like right after it happened, I think I would have a different answer. I mean, I think in those moments you tend to think about all the good that this person was, all of that stuff, all the really good memories. And obviously I still think about that stuff, but I think what kind of strikes me now, three and a half years later is that, we were different people in a lot of ways. We got along really well. She was so funny and so kind and smart and all that. I was an older brother. She was 2.5 years younger than I was. And so I was definitely kind of the older brother who would pick on her and tease her. And we kind of knew how to get a rise out of each other. We had arguments all the time. Even in our adult lives, I think we found ourselves like kind of butting heads sometimes because, just when you really know someone that deeply, that can also make it so sometimes you guys are maybe not always in agreement, or you kind of know you're trying to figure out like what this person's kind of going on about. So I think about that stuff. We got older and we kind of got to know each other in a deeper level. And we lost our mom to cancer when I was 14 and Mely was 11. So I think that we were always going to be super close no matter what. But once you go through something like that, at such a young and formative age, it really bonds you for life. And losing Mely was the most traumatic thing I've ever been through. And we lost their mom, like I said, and that was hit me really hard. I was 14. I was going through just like puberty and just like all sorts of new things in my life, and for that to happen at that age was really shaped me as a person, who I kind of became, how I viewed the world. And it did the same for Mely. And I think that's interesting that, when you lose someone, when you have a trauma like that and two people go through it, the way that they kind of react to it and how it affects them in the long run can be so different, even though you live in the same house and are sort of similar people. And so as we got older, Mely tended to be, I was very emotional. I'm very, sort of like rambunctious and loud and stuff like that. And Mely was, to a degree that, but definitely was a little calmer, a little more level-headed. She was the one who kind of tried to keep the peace in the house, the one who, kind of knew how to kind of talk to people and calm them down. I tend to get a little kind of wild and out there. And I think Mely always knew how to rein me in. And she was someone who was super, super special and really kind of knew how to make someone feel loved. She would really, really kind of go above and beyond what was expected of someone, whether it was a family member or a friend. She wanted to make you feel loved and special, and she did her best to make sure that you never forgot that. And now that I'm 3.5 years removed from it, I think about the good stuff, but also the stuff that it kind of makes up an entire person. We tend to treat people like they're saints once they die, and obviously you don't want to speak ill of the dead or anything. But now I do remember Mely as this whole person, as this person who, in the same breath, could make me feel loved and so a part of something. And then in the other could be, making fun of me or roasting me for something or holding me to a standard, or, we would get into these tiffs sometimes. And I really miss kind of having someone there to kind of call me out and to keep me accountable. It's definitely something that not everyone has the ability to, even friends who I've known a long time. I think just growing up in the same household and going through what we went through really kind of made us understand each other in a way that, I don't think that anybody else will ever understand me just as Mely did.
Yes, Albert. Yeah. So I relate to you on so many levels with what you've shared. There's really nothing like that sibling love. You know each other inside out. You've gone through life and the hardships of life together. I feel you on that, and I know many people will relate. So at the time, Mely was a manager and working at Trader Joe's when this happened. She had worked herself up to that position in the company. She was young, and then the unexpected. Can you share more about what went down that day, how things played out?
I had moved away from Los Angeles in March of 2018. I was, I don't know, I'd broken up with someone a few months before. I was, I don't know, 20, I guess 28, had just turned 28, or 29. So I was like, man, I'm almost 30. I haven't really, I don't know, done much in the way of like that normal people would say they've done anything. I like moved away a few times and had lived life. I was like happy, but also was kind of like, I don't know, I want something new. LA is kind of bumming me out right now. I kind of want to bounce. And I had gone to Minneapolis earlier in 2017 and really loved it. I went with my then girlfriend to visit it. And I said, oh, this is a cool city. Like if I ever want to move away again, maybe I'll move here. And I got tired of being in LA. And so I moved to Minneapolis. And so from March to July, I was 2,000 miles away. And it was the furthest I'd ever moved away from home. I was living my life. I was, establishing a friend group and had a job and, was kind of dating. And so I thought, maybe Minneapolis will be kind of my new home. I'll maybe meet someone, put some roots down. I had these sort of vague ideas, but I knew that LA for me was somewhere that I would always love and hold dear, but that I wanted to kind of be away from. And so I was in Minneapolis on July 21st. And I remember getting the first call, and the first call was from my dad. And I was at work, and so I didn't answer it right away. I figured, my dad has been calling me more because I'm living further away from home than ever. I had lived in San Francisco before, in Las Vegas, so it wasn't like he could just hop in his car. 5 hours later, he'd be with me. It was a bigger process. So I think he was kind of still dealing with me being that far away. And so I was like, what, I'll call him later. And within 10 seconds, I'd gotten another call from my brother. And I thought, oh, my brother lives in New Jersey. I don't know. It's weird that they're calling me, one after the other. And I answered, and my brother says, hey, Albert, like, don't worry. Like, we don't know anything yet, but there seems to be an active shooter at Mely's Trader Joe's. And initially, that was what was kind of said in the news. They said there was an active shooter who went into Trader Joe's, and we were having, we hear reports of one person having been shot maybe, but, details are still coming in, so we're not really sure. So the first thing, I hung up with him. First thing I did was call Mely. Mely never answered because, I'd find out later kind of the chain of events, but called her a few times, no answer. Called my dad again. He was somewhere else in town, and he was headed, rushing over to the Silver Lake Trader Joe's. And, my phone was on. I told my boss, hey, I might have to leave because something's happening. I can't really put it together. I'm hearing active shooter, but 20 minutes later, I'm hearing that it was police pursuing someone. And so basically from that moment on, I was playing phone tag with family members, with my sister's roommates, with anybody who I could get a hold of in Los Angeles who might be near the Silver Lake Trader Joe's. And as time kept going on, it became a little more apparent that maybe Mely was not, that something had happened, because what we had heard was that there was a guy who ran in and was holding people hostage. So that was maybe an hour later. Everything kind of started to fall together. And I said, well, okay, maybe Mely is one of the hostages. Or I'm hearing on the news that a bunch of people, were jumping out of windows and escaping or whatever. Maybe she left without her phone. Maybe she doesn't have her phone on her. So let me take to Twitter and see what I can do. And so I went on Twitter, put out a thing saying, my sister is a manager at Trader Joe's and I can't get a hold of her. I followed that up with a tweet saying, my sister's name is Mely Corado. And again, time kept going on and we weren't hearing anything. I was trying to look at the news and see what was going on. And I was just seeing the police were standing off with this dude. He was inside the Trader Joe's. And finally, after about 2.5 hours or so of going back and forth with the police, with my sister's roommates and my dad and my brother in Jersey and all that, I got a call from Trader Joe's, and Trader Joe said, "Well, hey, we can tell you that your sister's been shot. We don't know if she made it. Things are still kind of pouring in." And I said, "All right, like, are you sure that she's shot? Like, I need to know. And if you're telling me that she didn't make it, like, you need to be 100% positive." Like, "No, we're sorry, but we figured we'd call because people were telling us that they saw her get shot." And so then about 10 minutes later, I reported back to my dad, back to my brother, and said, "Hey, this is what I heard, but I'm not really sure." And they said, "Okay, well, we'll keep an eye out. We'll see what's happening." My dad was going to the police station not far from there because there were families who'd been separated or whatever were meeting with their loved ones. And so he thought he could maybe find Mely there. And obviously he never did. And about 10 minutes after that initial phone call from Trader Joe's, I got a call from the police from a blocked number saying, "Are you Albert Corado?" I said, "Yeah." "Have you talked to Trader Joe's? Have they told you anything about the situation?" I said, "Yeah, they're telling me that someone's been shot, that it's most likely my sister." And this LAPD officer, some woman, said, "Well, we don't have any record of anybody being shot. There's a hostage situation that is basically winding down right now, but we don't have any injuries reported so far. So just don't worry, keep your phone on, whatever." I forgot how we ended the call. And then I called my brother telling him, "Hey, Mely's okay, apparently. I'm getting mixed information here." I then called my sister's roommate. His name is Angel. And, we were good friends. And I called him and said, "Angel, like, I heard no one's been hurt. Like, I don't know, man. I don't know what to think." And he told me, "Albert, like, I'm sorry, but I was just told right now that Mely's dead." And so, I basically dropped to the floor, and, the phone fell out of my hands, and I could hear my dad in the background of my friend's phone call, crying and yelling at the police and yelling about what the fuck happened and all that stuff. And I hung up, and the first thing I did was to have to call my brother back and say, "Hey, like, I'm really sorry that I just told you that Mely was maybe okay, but I just got, confirmation that she's dead." And, we both sat on the phone with each other for a few minutes crying. I called my sister, Mely's other roommate, and talked to her, and she was in tears. And I finally got through to my dad, who, through, crying, was just saying, like, "I can't believe this happened. I don't know what's going on here. No one will tell me anything. No one will let me see her body. Like, I need to see her body to make sure that it's her who's been killed." And, at this point, it's Minneapolis is 2 hours ahead. So by this time it's I don't know, 8 o'clock or something. And I'm trying to get out of there, and I'm trying to find an Uber to take me so I can, like, leave there and go to Los Angeles from Minneapolis. But Minneapolis is not one of the busier airports. So the last flight is out, I think, at like 9 p.m. So by the time I got there were no flights to go back to Los Angeles. So I'm sitting there in the terminal, not being able to get a ticket. My dad's calling my brother. I have all my family from all over, LA and the country. And we have family in Australia, and they're calling me saying, "Is this true? I just heard about this. What's going on?" And as things kind of came out about the timeline of everything that happened, by the time I got that first call that something was happening, Mely was already likely dead, because she was shot. Basically what happened was this dude, the guy who the police were chasing, crashed his car into a light pole. Like, I think that the tire had been blown out, and he crashed his car. He got out of the car, ran into the Trader Joe's looking for a way out. He had already shot his grandmother and shot at the police and was being, pursued. And Mely thought what she thought she heard was a car crash, like someone crashing their car outside of the store. She went to go help someone. not knowing that this was a guy who was wanted by the police, not knowing that the police were about to fire into this Trader Joe's. So she went outside to check on it, and in that moment was hit by a bullet that was meant to kill Gene Atkins, who's the guy who ran inside. So by the time everybody ran to the back of the store, Mely ran to the front of the store, having been shot, basically looking for cover. So I don't know that Mely even knew that she had been shot by a police officer or what was going on. She went off to the side while everybody ran to the back of the store, away from the bullets, and she died in that spot. And by the time I was calling her, checking to see if she was okay, she was either about to die or had already died. And I think that's the thing that sticks with me, is that we spent 2.5 hours trying to call people, trying to get a hold of Mely. At this point, the 2 tweets that I had tweeted out, seeing if anyone had seen Mely, that was kind of my intention when I tweeted that. I figured, well, if Mely doesn't have her phone with her, maybe someone around her has a phone, is looking at Twitter, and can say, hey, your brother's looking for you, maybe call him. I was trying everything I possibly could to make sure that Mely was okay, to get a hold of her. And so we spent 2.5 hours calling my brother in New Jersey, calling my dad here in LA, calling everybody I could who I knew in Los Angeles, who could be near that intersection of Hyperion near Rowena. And Mely was already dead or clinging to life and having her last moments before I even got the call. And that has been, I've replayed that day so many times in the last 3 years. And I had to stay home that night because I could not find a flight home until the next morning. And I remember talking to my dad, maybe an hour or two after we got the confirmation that Mely had been killed. And I said, Dad, I'm trying to come home, but I can't come home just this moment. There's no way for me to, the closest big airport is Chicago. It's 6 hours. I could maybe do that, but I think I'm just going to fly home tomorrow. Earliest flight is, 5:30 in the morning. He said, it's fine. Just come home. And I got all my stuff together. I remember this weird little detail that the night before I had gone to my friend's apartment warming. They had just rented a new apartment. And so I was like, oh, cool, we're going to go to a party. I brought a thing of beer, and I brought this bottle of cheap rum that I bought for $5. I'm like, yeah, I like to have a good time. We'll bring it. But I remember looking at Twitter, announcing on Twitter that Mely had been killed because people were asking me, hey, did you ever find your sister? We're hearing one person died. Was that your sister? And I had to tweet. And I said, she didn't make it. I'm really distraught right now. But I remember my phone blowing up, getting calls from every major news outlet. Somehow they had found my phone number, getting messages on Twitter and Facebook from people wanting to talk, media people wanting to talk, while sipping on this very cheap rum. And just in my bed thinking, what even is this situation? What do I do? What's going to happen? How is Mely not here anymore? And obviously I wasn't in LA. I wasn't near her. I hadn't seen her body. So to me, it hadn't really clicked that it was real. It was just well, I just talked to Mely 2 days ago on the phone. I texted with her last night, and now you're telling me that Mely is dead, just like that. This hostage situation ends, and as a result, my sister is now dead. And I'll never forget looking at my phone, and one of those news alerts popped up, and it said, 1 woman dead in Trader Joe's shootout. And I remember thinking, that's Mely. That is, you normally read this stuff on the internet or whatever, and you're like, oh, that's so awful. And you maybe think about the families and what they're going through. But to know that this was a thing that was on the news that affected me, that was the one woman was Mely, was my sister, was this person who, loomed large in my life, who I loved so much and thought about all the time. It was traumatizing. And I sat with my roommates and we cried, and they gave me a ride to the airport the next day, and I came home, and I didn't go back to Minneapolis till about, I think, 4 months later to pick up the rest of my stuff, and then I've been in LA ever since.
My goodness. So I just got to say, that must have been really difficult to deal with. Losing your sister, of course, all of that, of course. But just being so far from your family at the time, on top of everything, and not just being able to be there. I know it also hit national media. You're seeing it being posted about, you're being contacted by strangers, and then you had to wait.
I think that some of that, me having moved away, I think filled me with a lot of guilt for a long time. Because Mely's birthday is in April, so I missed her last birthday. I wasn't here. I called her obviously, and we talked, and all that stuff. But I think about, well, I was gone for 4 months, and then she was killed, and so the last time I saw her in person was March 5th or something, and I was leaving at like 5 a.m, and she had to work at like 6 a.m, and so I remember like just seeing her saying bye. All right, well, I'll text you when I'm on the road or whatever. And so I thought about missing her birthday and missing just special events, and seeing her be her first few months as being a manager and all that. And that filled me with a lot of guilt of like, I should have been here. I should have, and this thing that happens of like, oh, I could have maybe saved her. Or, I think about all these things that you kind of cling to when you're grieving, is how you could have stepped in to save this person, or all, stuff like that. So I think being far away and having not seen her for 4 months, I think that was one of the longest stretches I ever went without seeing her. Even when I moved to Vegas or San Francisco, I would still see her. I'd come home, but I hadn't been able to come home yet. And so I didn't get to see her for the last 4 months of her life. And that was something that really kind of ate away at me. And I think I'm dealing with it better now, but for a long time, I was like, I wasn't here for her last birthday. And like, I always regretted it. And, there's pictures of that day of her and my dad and her friends. And, I just feel like I wish I would have been there. But again, you just don't know.
Yeah.
When no one is ever going to tell you, no one can predict, hey man, if you leave right now in 4.5 months, your sister's going to be dead. And, no one can tell you that. No one. And if someone did tell you that, you'd be like, what are you talking about? Like that sounds insane. But, it's like that thing of, my mom got sick with cancer, and 6 months later she was dead. But like, I think about the days and the months leading up to when we found out that she had cancer. You're like living your life, you're just doing what you're doing, and you aren't ever really thinking about your mortality, or that like someone you love could be like told that they're sick and then go away. Or in Mely's case, someone you love, you could just talk to them and the next day they're gone. And like the finality of that, the way that there's no coming back from that these, you'll never talk to them again. You'll never hear their voice again. You'll never be in their presence again. That to me is it still haunts me. It's like you see, I remember seeing Mely's body for the first time the next afternoon. And, it's like, I saw her when she was brought home from the hospital. I saw her grow up and have her beautiful long hair when she was a little girl, to when I chopped off her beautiful long hair because I was a bully of a brother. Like I think about all that stuff, and all the moments that make up a life, all the moments that make up a relationship, like a brother and a sister relationship, all of those things, the good, the bad, the stuff that I remember, even though it's boring and has no significance. You think about all those things. You don't always think about like the moments where it's like, oh, this was the best day we ever had. And obviously I do think about that, but I was also thinking about really mundane, boring stuff where, oh yeah, Mely and I one time drove up and down, Ventura Boulevard in the Valley and ate ice cream. And there's no reason I should remember that, but I do. Yeah. But I also remember, January of 2018, we went out to visit my brother in New Jersey, and it's only an hour train ride away from New York. And I got to show Mely New York. I had been there a few years before, and I got to show her the Statue of Liberty and the Brooklyn Bridge and all that. And so I was thinking about all of those moments. And, at the end of the day, I was left with just this pain of like wishing I had been there for the last 4 months. But I wanted to go and explore and do my own thing. And I felt bad about that for a long time. I don't feel bad about it anymore, but yeah, it sort of ate away at me for a long time.
Yeah, that's understandable. And, you being she was your baby sister. So
yeah.
Yeah. So I know you said when you received a block call from the police officer woman, and at that time she had told you that nobody had that it was no. So then you started thinking your sister was okay. After that, like your guys is, I want to know how your guys, because it's so different. A lot of our loved ones, they wrote him off as suspect, some kind of interaction, whether they were a suspect or whether, they turned into a suspect after being killed by police. But, it's so different. So a lot of us, we have really poor treatment from the police officers. We get played, we get wronged in so many ways. I want to know your guys' experience, excuse me, with the cops directly, and if you guys got treated any differently, a little better, if you guys got more info. So maybe a couple of things I did want to see. So you did get to see her body. I want to know like how long that Kate, like how long you guys had to wait, or if it was pretty immediate, and just the treatment with officers, and if they were how they were treating you guys.
Yeah. So when I got home, I think it was finally about, I don't know, maybe 8:30 a.m., 9 a.m. And went to go see my dad. And, obviously like when that happens, there's tons of family around or whatever. So my dad had already, the night that Mely was killed, which was a Saturday, he went to that same police station. It's on San Fernando, I think it's like Northeast LAPD station. But he went there and they showed him pictures of Mely's body to identify. He wasn't able to see her right away. He wanted to, they said no, whatever. They gave him the runaround. The next morning when I got there, he had already made a few phone calls to try to get into the morgue to see Mely's body. And I think I got there like 9:30 a.m. and he made a few calls. He had met the chief of police, Michael Moore. He'd met Garcetti, and he'd met like a couple of high-ranking LAPD people, and he had their numbers. And so he was calling Chief Moore saying, I want to see my daughter. And he says, well, sorry, I don't have any sort of authority there. He called Garcetti on his personal line. He said, oh, I'm sorry. Basically they were giving us the runaround saying that they didn't have power. And I'm like, you're the mayor and the chief of police, and the police are the ones who perpetrated this murder. So you telling me you have no power? It's like, police use their power in bad ways all the time, but he wasn't willing to bend the rules or whatever in that moment. And so finally, after about 6 hours of getting the runaround from LAPD and the morgue and all that, we were let in for 5 minutes. We went up a few floors, saw Mely's body through a window basically, and she was covered up basically up to her neck, and I saw her, and it was just like I was seeing my sister who I'd known, her hair and the way that she looked and her face. And, we looked pretty similar, and my dad looks kind of the same. And it was just like, sort of jarring, and we were crying and finally this was real. It was like Mely. It wasn't that Mely didn't come home. It wasn't that she was missing. It's like she was dead. And we had gotten that, basically the final proof that had happened. And so that was, 3:30 on a Sunday. And we knew that the LAPD had killed Mely. And the thing that happened was that the LAPD told the LA Times that it was the suspect, Gene Atkins, who had shot Mely, knowing full well exactly what went down, that the police fired into the store. They tried to pass it off as this guy was the one who did it. And obviously, we found out, 3 days later that it wasn't him. It was actually a police bullet. But there was still, that Sunday, there was still the misinformation, the false information out there that the suspect had shot Mely. So we knew that, though. My dad knew the moment that he was told that Mely was killed. He'd heard from a few employees inside of Trader Joe's that it was the police, that they saw Mely get shot, that the police were the ones who shot in the store, and that the guy who had held them hostage didn't want to shoot anybody, was not there to kill people. He was basically trying to save his own life, and initially was looking for an escape route. When he didn't find it, he basically played the only card he had was, I'm going to hold these people hostage. The police are going to kill me if I go back out there. And I'm just going to sit here and basically milk my time and hopefully save my own life. And so we knew that it wasn't him. We knew that it was the police. And for them to not only deny it in the paper of record in Los Angeles, but also deny us access to Mely's body, that already was kind of like, my dad says tomorrow morning, Monday morning, we're going to see a lawyer. We're going to sue the city of LA, because this is This is wrong. They know what they did. They're trying to pass it off. They're trying to give us the runaround. They're trying to treat us like we're just some grieving family who's not going to call them out on this. And that Monday we went, got a lawyer. It was a family friend of ours. He was going to put us in touch with other lawyers who kind of specialize in taking on the LAPD and big corporations. And the Tuesday, the morning of the press conference where the LAPD had to come out and say it was our bullet, the police chief wanted to meet with me and my dad. Basically, he wanted us to meet with him for a photo op because Mely had a bunch of belongings, her car keys, a water bottle, all the stuff that she had with her, and we hadn't gotten it yet. And he was like, well, I want to hand this over to you, but also would love to like just speak with you. And we basically said, no, you're not gonna get a picture with us. We're not playing that game. You know, I've lived here in LA my whole life. My dad has been here in this country and in Los Angeles for over 40 years. Like, we know how LAPD operates. The moment that they can put the responsibility on someone else, they will do that. If they can make it so that they are seen to be the good guys and that it's somebody else's fault. So you know, you mentioned family members, you know, people being killed, they're usually seen as suspects. In Mely's case, there wasn't any way you can make her out to be the suspect. But what you could do, and what they did, was run a toxicology test on her body, looking for drugs, looking for anything that they can pin on it. So if Mely had been high at work or had done drugs a few days before, they could say, well, you know, she was obviously on drugs, not in her right mind. You know, she wandered into the bullet. You know, we've seen it play out in the media. So they took a different approach. As normally, you know, I'm friends with the family of Daniel Hernandez and Anthony Vargas. And what's happened there is the police are saying, well, they came at me. They were, you know, having a mental health crisis. They were dangerous. So I had to do what I had to do. With Mely, that, you know, again, Mely not knowing that, I don't even think she knew she was shot by a cop. They then tried to after she was dead, make it so if they had anything they could point to as to maybe why she was killed by the police or whatever, they would do that. And they, you know, police have no respect for human life. And so if they're going to impugn the reputation of a dead woman, someone who was at work, they're going to do that. And so we figured, you know what, you're not getting any pictures with us. You're not getting any sort of forgiveness from us. We're not going to play that game. We're not going to sit there and shake hands with the police chief. You guys know what you did and you need to own up to it. And so we filed a lawsuit a few months later, and, you know, basically has been no contact with the police. We refused to meet with them. We refused to, you know, I mean, like, you know, they wanted to share some, like, there was a videotape that was inside of the Trader Joe's that they wanted to share with us. And we were going to go and look at it. And they basically told us that, well, we want you guys to come, but without your lawyers. Well, I said, I'm not going to sit here and be in a LAPD building watching the videotape of my sister's last moments without some sort of protection. You're not going to get me and my dad in a room in downtown to show us this. And when we finally did get the video, I haven't been able to watch it because it's too traumatizing for me. There are 5 seconds missing.
Wow. Yeah.
So overall, I would say that, you know, they found new ways to be awful to a family. You know, they basically they had to be creative in that, like, in every other instance, usually they can say in the news, well, this person was a danger. We had to do what we had to do. Obviously it's wrong and it's awful, but that's sort of what they always do. In this one, they had to figure out, well, how can we make it so we seem like the good guys? And that's what they did. And we didn't get Mely's autopsy for an entire year.
Wow. So
I think the treatment has been across the board. Obviously the tactics were different, but I think the result is the same. And the mindset that they have is the same, is that, you know, they can't be seen to be bad. They can't be seen to be negligent or careless or whatever. They need to be seen as the protectors. Mm-hmm. And that's what they did with Mely. And the toxicology test came back negative. Mely didn't have any drugs in her system, but even if she did, it doesn't matter. Mely was at work, and her last action as a human being was to go and help someone.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's what kind of, I think, is what informs kind of, you know, the work that I do and everything since then, is trying to live in that spirit of Mely going to help someone, not knowing what is beyond that door, not knowing that in you know, and I kind of break down stuff in how long, in minutes, because growing up, you think about all this awful stuff that happened, shootings, and even something like 9/11, right? You think about the time it took for all that stuff to elapse. So I think about like Mely, from the time she was shot to when she died, it was probably 35 or 40 minutes. And like 35 or 40 minutes is an episode of a TV show, but it also, so much of your life can change in those moments. So I always go back to that, like, sort of thing of Mely having, been shot, and then 40 minutes later, it's like it completely rewrites my life. It completely, changes my family and our future. And it's very something that I always kind of come back to is Mely's final moments, and then the chain reaction that happens from when Mely's being killed to then me getting involved in what I am involved in, other people who are Mely's friends getting involved in stuff, and just kind of that kind of, wave of energy that kind of gets emitted when this happens. It inspires people to do stuff. It makes people sad, it makes people cry, but ultimately, in a lot of instances, it makes regular people like me or other family members into these advocates for their loved ones. And, again, you will never have our people, our family members back, but if you do something good in their name, then in that way you are still serving them. And that's kind of what I wanted. And, the lawsuit is one thing that we're doing for Mely, but ultimately it's been 3 years and we don't even know how far we are. And we don't even know if we're even going to be able to see the end of this until maybe 2 more years.
Yeah. Okay. So the lawsuit. Yeah. And real quick, I will say, just for people watching that might not know, these things take forever.
Yep.
They joked at us last time saying, oh, well, it could take you guys 10 years, trying to discourage us and have us take this really disrespectful deal. So it's ridiculous. But yeah, if you can share just a little bit about the lawsuit and what's come of it so far.
Yeah, so we filed in November of 2018. We went with our family friend who's a lawyer, and then he got us in touch with this big lawyer named John Taylor, who takes on LAPD a bunch. He takes on, he's taken on the Boy Scouts. Like, he does, wrongful death, negligence, sexual abuse, that kind of stuff. So he's like a guy who knows his way around this stuff. But that being said, I mean, I think that the interesting issue here, and I think why, every case and every tragedy is unique. And what makes ours unique is that because there's this other person who was present there, who they are now trying to blame for Mely's murder, that kind of makes it harder for us. So the LAPD and the city's thought process on this is that since he's the one that started the chain of events, they had to pursue him because he had shot his grandmother and stolen her car and all that. They're saying, well, he's the one at fault, because if he hadn't done what he did, we wouldn't have to pursue him and then shoot into the store. And because of that, because he's on trial for Mely's murder, on top of, 10 other things that are going to get him, sent to prison for the rest of his life, that then is getting in the way of our case, because they're not giving us all the evidence that we want. That we're not getting the police report, we're not getting a bunch of stuff, a bunch of photos and all that stuff, because they're saying, well, if we give this to you, it may get in the way of the lawsuit that we have against this dude, who, by the way, they're saying is responsible for your loved one's death. He's the one you should be mad at, not the LAPD, not the city. You need to be mad at him. And that's been kind of getting in the way. And our lawyers are, figuring out ways to maneuver around that. But really, it's been really tough to kind of get any meaningful discovery, meaningful evidence, because that guy exists and he's the reason. They're saying he's the reason Mely's dead. And I don't buy it. I don't buy, he was in a grocery store with a gun for 3 hours and managed to not shoot anybody. So I don't think, I don't believe that he was in there trying to kill people. So they say, well, he was going to kill people. Well, he didn't. Mm-hmm. So if you choose to fire into a crowded grocery store on a Saturday afternoon in a busy part of town at a busy grocery store, you know that those are the risks that you're taking. There are 8 shots that were fired that day. One of them hit Gene Atkins in the arm, non-life threatening, so he was fine. one hit Mely and she was dead within 40 minutes. And the other 6 hit nothing. They hit a wall or a fruit stand or whatever. But I always think about if those 8 shots had hit people, that could have been 8 people who are dead.
Yeah.
Or 8 people who are injured, 8 people who are traumatized, 8 people who are, and people always say like, oh, that's so negligent. They could have shot somebody's kid. I'm like, well, they did shoot somebody's kid.
Yeah.
Mely is my dad's daughter. She's my sister. It's sort of, in the grand scheme of things, it's obviously like people like to think that there's levels or whatever. Like, yeah, obviously if a kid gets killed, it's very tragic. But Mely was 27. She had her whole life ahead of her. She was, is 7 months into being a manager at Trader Joe's and wanted to become, get promoted and become a bigger part of that culture. And her life was cut short by the negligence of the LAPD. So, we're still trying to figure some stuff out in how we're going to go forward and how do we get, evidence when the city doesn't want to give it to us. And I mean, we're here to fight to the end. And what I always tell people is like the lawsuit is one avenue that we're taking, right? Like there are many, many ways to get back at the police, get back at the city, to get some form of, whatever, if you want to call it justice, you can call it that. But there's many ways to do that and to keep fighting for Mely. And a lawsuit is a good one. Obviously, I think it's what's available. We seek justice in the ways that are available to us. Yeah. And so the lawsuit is one of many things that we're doing to try to not only, bring justice to Mely, but also uplift her and all the other people who've been killed by police, by the state. We want to make sure that, Mely is seen as not only, this unique, amazing person who had her whole life ahead of her, but also as part of a bigger sort of patchwork of people who've been killed in Los Angeles. And every story is different. If you think about all the stories you see in the news, every single story is different. What is the connecting factor here is the LAPD and just police in general, their lack of care for human life, their lack of any sort of semblance of mercy or anything good. They are always going to do, everybody talks about the police and, it was a split-second decision and they did what they had to do. But to me, the split-second decision is actually them thinking, can I get away with this? If I fire into this crowded grocery store and I kill a bunch of people, am I going to be protected by the LAPD, protected by the LAPD police union, by the media, by all number of people and things that protect cops? And that to me is ultimately what when they're about to shoot at someone, when they're about to kill someone, that is the math they're doing in their head. It is not, am I going to hurt people? Can I live with my decision? It's, can I get away with this? Because we have seen over and over again that judges and juries and the media and movies and books love to protect cops. And so that to me was them being like, you know what? Well, whoever dies, we might kill the bad guy, quote unquote, the guy that we think is bad. We may kill a bunch of people. Ultimately, we're still going to be seen as the good guys. And that's how LAPD and the sheriff's department operate.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And just appreciate you throwing in, even the movies, even the books, it's not just the police, it's all these other people too. And just in general, it's really hard to fight up against, speak up against. And I know you have, so after your sister's death, you've gotten really involved. Will you share a little bit more about what it's brought you to now, what you're doing now, and just a little bit about over the years, what you've done? Yeah, I mean, and I do want to mention too, I think the media plays such a large role. And here in Los Angeles, the LA Times loves to print what police say as the gospel. That's another thing that we need to take a look at, is like, the police are going to release stuff and say, this is what happened. And if the news media goes with it, if Channel 7 or 9 or the newspapers run with it, they're as complicit as anybody else. They're kind of just they're being a mouthpiece for the LAPD. So I think that's another important thing. In LA, there really isn't a desire by the media to take on the police, and there needs to be. And
And as far as, what I've been involved in, I gave myself a year of grieving. I went to group therapy. I did what I had to do. I cried and talked to friends and kept, stayed home a lot and cried in my bed. I did all those things because I felt, I don't know how I'm going to live without Mely. I didn't know how I was going to live without my mom. And I figured out a way to deal with my emotions and live and do all that. So I knew that it was possible. And what I did for a year was basically grieve and try to figure out what my next steps of my life were going to be. What do I do in a world where Mely is no longer here, where I do not have the person I love the most in the world? And when we did, so the first year anniversary in 2019, we did, it was a block party, basically. We had become friendly with the people who run the Silver Lake Church. And they were also a place where a lot of people afterward were going and meeting up with families. And, it was a community thing. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm not a religious person, but I like these people. We'll do something at the church. We'll do a remembrance, we'll do some stuff. We'll have people playing music and we'll play, Mely's favorite songs and have food. But once that was done, I kind of figured, well, this is something that's still being talked about in the media. More and more people are being killed by police. Instead of just being Mely's grieving brother, which I'm always going to be, I need to be her biggest advocate. And so I didn't know what that meant or what kind of shape that was going to take, but I found myself in a position where I could take time and not have to, work a ton. And I had all this energy and all this anger. And so what I started to do was well, this city is failing people all the time. It fails people by evicting them and making them homeless. And then when they're homeless, not taking care of them. And then, having the police carry out these sweeps that hurt people, that displace people. The city funds, developers who want to build these big high rises that no one can afford. And then it blames people for their own plight. It blames people for being homeless. It blames people for being killed by police. It fails people on an everyday level, and it fails people on a bigger level. And so for me, that meant I'm going to go and start getting involved in my community and see what I can do. And so started doing homeless outreach with SELA, this organization here in LA. I started going to meetings for various organizations, and ultimately the main goal was to kind of make sure that Mely's story is not forgotten, that people know how the city treated our family, what they did to Mely. And so I started getting involved with a lot of groups that were kind of taking the fight to the city, to the police. And so that was No Olympics LA. They're an anti-Olympic, group that I kind of joined up with and learned about how the Olympics basically make cities, unsafe by giving us more police and surveillance. And then I started doing stuff with Street Watch and all these groups that were kind of doing this really good work that, in a city that prides itself for being so liberal and taking care of its people, we know that that's not the truth. I mean, more and more parts of town are being overrun by tents, and it's not the fault of the people in the tents. It's the fault of the people who are crafting the policy that makes people become homeless at a rate that is incredibly high. And so since then, I started this group called People City Council with a few friends of mine, and we raised a bunch of money and have given it to organizations in town that are doing good work. I use a lot of my time to advocate for other people who have been killed by police. I've met tons of families of people who've been killed by police, like Daniel Hernandez and Anthony Vargas, and I'm friends with Minerva Garcia, was a close friend of Vanessa Marquez, who was killed by the South Pasadena PD. So I've kind of become a part of this bigger group of people out there trying to hold the city accountable. And so I've become friendly with people in Black Lives Matter LA and other organizations. And and then ultimately that led to me running for city council here in Los Angeles. I'm running in District 13, which is Echo Park and Atwater and East Hollywood, and it's a big chunk of LA. And there's 15 districts here in Los Angeles, and each of them have their own problems. But the problems that are kind of you're seeing in every single district is over policing. Too much of our money is going to police, and homelessness. They're rents are rising and people can't keep up with the, with the increases in rent, and people aren't being paid enough. And so to me, that's another sort of avenue that I can take. Ultimately everything is under the umbrella of Mely and justice for Mely. But if you can help other people in that mission, then I think that that's good. Because again, Mely's final act in the world was to go and help someone. So I have to do the same thing, not knowing what that's going to lead to, because sometimes you try to help people and it's not always met with kindness, and that's okay. It's fine. We have to help people no matter if they want to help us back or no matter if they appreciate it or not. Is it nice to be appreciated? Of course, but ultimately we have to help people. Helping people is our duty. And if the city is not going to do it, then it's up to us, activists and organizers, to do that. But if you can sit in a seat of power and help people from that, I think that's ultimately powerful. If you have people who actually care about victims of state violence and homeless people and people who are struggling and suffering at the hands of the city, then that to me is the most powerful thing you can do. And again, city council is one avenue. We did a march for Mely in 2020 that basically called out the LAPD and the officers who killed her. We did one in 2020. We did one this year. So the work is never ending. We're going to have a march for Mely every year. We're going to keep coming after the city. I'm going to keep coming after them, whether it's on city council or with organizations and groups here in Los Angeles, or just using social media. Social media is such an incredibly powerful tool, and it can really kind of help you spread that message. And I've met a lot of really amazing friends and organizers through that, and it connected me to a larger group of people who are here to change the city for the better, because ultimately no one on city council or city government or in the LAPD is actually going to do anything that's going to help us. They're going to do what they can to hold on to their power. And LAPD does that all the time. They never want to be held accountable. And so, that's kind of, it's a lot of stuff that I'm involved in, but they're all equally important, because ultimately, the less, we want to get to the point where there are no murders by police anymore, where there's no, that Mely Corado and Daniel Hernandez and all these people, you don't have those names out there anymore of people who've been killed by police. We want to get that to where that's not a thing anymore. We don't have to worry about going to work and being killed. That is ultimately the goal, is to make a city that actually cares about its people, and not just, a city that says it cares about its people and then does everything to harm them. We actually want to live in a city that, I have given my life to this city. It owns me. Mely died in this city. She was the daughter of Los Angeles, and to see her be killed by two of its employees, and then seeing the apparatus of government and policing here in Los Angeles do everything it can to not take responsibility for that, is frustrating, and it fills me with a never-ending anger that I'm going to use, for the rest of my life, to come after them, because nothing will ever bring Mely back, but payback will be served in one form or another, whether it's me going on city council and stripping the funding of the LAPD as much as I possibly can, or whether it's groups around town showing people exactly how bad cops are. The fight is never ending until the police are gone. I'm an abolitionist, so my personal belief is that if we get rid of the LAPD, we're going to have a safer city. And I think people don't really get that yet. A lot of people are kind of trying to figure out what police kind of mean in their life. But to me, they don't belong in our society anymore. We have moved past the need for police, because they keep showing us that they don't actually care. They keep showing us that the hundreds of families of people killed by police, they think we're worthless and they don't want anything to do with us. So it's really our job to try to come after them and uplift the people that we love. Mely will never come back, and I have to live with that. And there are days where it's very, very, very hard to accept that. But what helps is coming after the LAPD, sharing Mely's story with as many people as I can, because ultimately that's kind of all I can do. My life as a normal person ended, on July 21st, 2018. I then became the person who has to go and tell people about Mely and remind them that behind every news story is a real person and a real family who is grieving, who is trying to figure out how they can even go on. And in my instance, it was a very, very public, very sort of news media heavy thing. They were talking about it for weeks in the paper, but not every family gets that. It's a curse to be known, to be in the media, but it's also, it can help spread awareness. Not every family gets to have that work in their advantage. There's so many people whose names are never uttered in the news media because so many people are being killed by police that only a few of them are actually making it out there. So, my hope is to not only speak for the families who can't speak, but also give people and the families their own voices so they can then advocate for their own people. If they're having a problem finding their voice and finding how to speak about their loved one, I want to give them that, because ultimately that's the most powerful thing you can have is your voice and the memories you have of your loved one.
Yes, thank you, Albert. That's really important. That's something Voice of Strength is about, sharing our stories, but also, uplifting the other families, the ones that need it. We all need it. You took a year to grieve. I think that's a first I've heard of someone actually kind of taking the time. I think a lot of us families just dive in and don't really get to do that. So I think that's important. And now, like, the work you're doing, that's awesome. And the issues you're hitting, everything's just so interconnected with each other. So much props to you for being involved as much as you are and really taking a stance. And I do want to say too, just for your family, everybody that's impacted, condolences to them. I'm glad you guys were able to have the awareness at the time to not be even like fooled by the police and the way they do the families. Even though she was not a suspect, she was still, you guys still got poor treatment, and the stories, were not correct that they put out, and they don't correct it with the news and the police themselves. So I'm glad you guys have been able to fight back and as a family too together. Is there anything else that you would like to share about your sister? Or also, there are families that are watching this our series regularly, whether they're brand new or whether they're been around for many years. If there's anything for them.
Yeah, I mean, as far as Mely goes, I think that it's like Mely was very special to me. Very unique, very a person who, obviously will forever be in my mind as someone who holds a lot of weight in my heart. And that was the case before she was killed. And I think that, we think about our family so much and how afraid we would be to lose them. And I thought about that too. After my mom died, I lived with this fear, and I still live with it, of losing people. And when you see it happen in real time, it can be really tough. But I think Mely was unique and amazing. But overall too, she was a normal person. And I think that that's like something that we have to remember, is that, like, no matter what, no matter who this person was, whether they, were a well-known person, Mely was not a known person. Her customers knew her. She had a group of friends and all that. She was an everyday person living her life. And to me, that's as rich and that's as powerful as if she had been someone who was known and loved by the general public. These are people. We're living our lives. Mely was at work, doing what she could to, like, have a good life and be nice to people and give back and whatever. I heard from so many people about her, helping them out with whatever, hey, like, your sister put in a good word for me and helped me get a job, or whatever it was. She was doing what she could to be a good, decent human being. And I think that that's all that can be expected of anybody. And whether they were, your loved one was working towards something bigger, whether they were struggling with some sort of issue or anything like that, there is no excuse for what the state and the police do to our loved ones. They could be unemployed and not doing anything and not have any ambition. And it's just as tragic as if they had been in the height of their life doing amazing work. It shouldn't happen. And so for me, it's like, Mely was amazing and wonderful, but she was a regular kid who grew up in the Valley, who had dreams and aspirations and all that, just like everyone else. And it's wild to see that stuff be completely erased when the media talks about people. When the media talks about people, they talk about, if there's anything bad in their past, they will talk about that, but they will never uplift people the way they should be uplifted. They never give them the due that they deserve. And I'm hoping that changes. And what's going to change it is the families advocating. And one thing I do want to say to the families is that if you are fighting for your loved one, I think that is the most admirable thing you can do. I think that whatever form that takes is powerful and valid and necessary. And, I always say families don't have to do that. If it is too painful to talk about in a public setting, if it's too much, if you can't bring yourself to do that, it's okay. You don't need to be that. It is, no one will blame you if you want to just not talk about it and disappear and grieve on your own. That is valid. But if you are hesitant and you want to get out there and you want to do something, and if you want to bring your loved one's story to the masses, to people, to the general public, it is imperative that we have more and more families speak out. And so if you are hesitant and don't know how to go about it, reach out to your local BLM chapter, reach out to me. I will try to guide you or point you to a direction where you can be the advocate for your loved one, because the city is not going to give them the respect they deserve. They're not going to give them the attention they deserve. And at worst, we'll try to make them seem like a bad person for what happened to them. So, if you're hesitant, if you want to do this work, it is, you belong in this movement. Your story belongs out there. So find ways to engage with that, because it's so important for families to do this. And I've seen families go from speaking at things and being very shy and nervous and not knowing how to do it, to a year later being, so powerful in the way they speak about their loved one. And it can be done. It can be done. It just takes a little bit of time, and it takes a little bit of understanding your own boundaries and what you want to talk about, what you don't want to talk about. It is a process. But I think that year of me kind of taking time really taught me. And again, not everyone has that. Not everyone is afforded that time. But if you are looking to speak out and are hesitant, it is important that you do so.
Once again, big thank you, Albert, for joining us. And big thank you to everybody who has tuned in with us. This is Marissa Barrera of Voices of Strength. We are wrapping up episode number 38 of our series, in which we are amplifying the voices of those who have lost loved ones at the hands of police in the USA, sharing the true narratives behind our loved ones' killings. To find previous episodes, learn more about our work, please visit our site at www.voicesofstrength.info.